Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we are going to be making an apple pie. So I don't know if you know this, but tomorrow is March 14th, which is 3.14, also the number of pi for any math lovers out there, which means it's Pie Day. And my husband, who is an accountant, his office does a Pie Day celebration every March 14th where people bring in pie. So we are making an apple pie for him to bring into the office with him tomorrow. So let's start by showing you what we have here. You'll see we don't have much right now. We basically have a big stovetop pot. We have some apples, a peeler, a knife, and a cutting board. So we're gonna start by prepping the apples for the stove. They take a long time to cook down. So first we'll prep the apples and then we'll come back, make the crust while the apples are cooking down. And then we'll come back again and prep the filling. So for the apples, essentially I have 6 apples here. You'll see they are quite large, these apples. So here is a fairly large apple, here's a smaller one, just as comparison. So these apples are fairly large, so I'm doing 6 large apples. If they were to be all on the smaller side, then I would probably do 8 apples. This is a recipe that I have made over and over again, but once again, I've never really truly measured, so we're going to measure it out together so that you can make it at home. So first up, we are going to peel the apples and then cut the apples. So I have one peeled here already. So now that it's peeled, I'm literally just going to cut it, core it, and then cut it into smaller pieces, just kind of slicing it into smaller pieces into my pot. And then I am basically going to repeat this with all of my 6 apples. Now, to spare you from having to watch me peel apples for the next, 6 or 7 minutes, I'm going to pause this here and then I will come back as soon as all of my apples are peeled, cored, and cut up. So we will see you in about 5 minutes. All right, welcome back. My apples are now all cut up. You'll see I've diced them into fairly small pieces. And you can choose different types of apples to make apple pie. Really, there's no best apple. Some people like different apples to make them. These particular apples are Honeycrisp. Honeycrisps are a little bit harder than some other apples, like Macintosh, for example, is a little bit of a softer apple. So these ones actually take a little bit longer to essentially boil down than would a Macintosh. So the stove cooking time will be different depending on the apple type that you chose, but that's all right. You just keep an eye on it and then you'll figure out when it's ready, and I'll walk you through it along the way. So now that all of our apples are cut up, we are going to put some water in here. Or in the pot, I guess. So I'm not exactly sure how much water I usually put in, so I'm just going to measure it out with you here so that we can see. So let's start with 2 cups. So here is 2 cups. That is not enough. We'll add another 2 cups. And that is looking pretty good. Essentially, you want the apples to be almost covered. So right now the water is just about covering the apples. I'm actually going to add 1 more cup. There we go. That looks pretty good. So now all of the apples are basically almost submerged in water. You can see here. So basically submerged in water. So now I'm going to put the top on it and I'm going to go put it on the stove on medium heat. And then once it starts to kind of boil, then we'll turn it down a little bit for it to simmer. But I'm going to go put it over there and then I will come back and we'll make our crust together. And in the time that we make the crust, the water will probably just be starting to boil, and then I'll take you over to my stove where I can show you what it looks like. So I will be back in just a couple minutes here, ready to make a pie crust. All right, so you can see over here, the apples are now on the stove at about medium-ish heat. Now we are going to make our crust. So to make the crust, it's pretty simple, not a lot of ingredients. We're going to use some oat flour, we're going to use some maple syrup, we're going to use some almond butter, some cinnamon, and some water. That is it, pretty simple. So we're actually going to start by putting in the almond butter, and we're going to go about 2/3, let's do 3/4 of a cup of almond butter. So So let's pour this in here. I actually think that that is about all that's left in this container. This almond butter, again, just like the natural peanut butter that I like to use, this is like very natural almond butter, literally just almonds that make this up. So let's keep scooping here. The bottom is a little bit hard, hasn't been mixed in fully, so let's see here. That looks good. So 3/4 of a cup is what we will do here. Perfect. Let's scrape that in. Then let's add in some maple syrup. So for the crust, you don't want the crust to be too sweet because the filling will be sweet in and of itself. So we're actually going to do 1/3 of a cup of maple syrup. So let's add that in. There we go. All right, there we go, 1/3 of a cup. That is what I said. Yeah, I had to double check that one. Is it actually 1/3 of a cup? Yep. And then we are going to do let's not do a full tablespoon. Let's do 1/2 tablespoon of cinnamon. We'll also be adding some cinnamon to our apples. So here is 1/2 tablespoon of cinnamon. That looks good. And then for our flour, we're gonna measure this 1/2 cup at a time. So let's start with 1/2 cup here. So here's 1/2 cup. Let's do 1/2 cup plus 1/4 cup to begin with. So we are at 3/4 of a cup, and now we're going to add some water. So for the water, I'm literally gonna add 1/4 cup at a time because I'm not exactly sure how much we're gonna need. So let's start by 1/4 cup, and we'll do another 1/4 cup. So 1/2 cup to begin with. There we go. And now we are just going to stir this up very well. The idea here is that you want the batter to be fairly thick. So it's not going to be like your typical pie crust that you would like roll out and it gets flaky. This is a little bit of a different crust consistency, which is totally fine. Just adds a little different dimension to your pie, I guess, than what you might be used to. So this actually right now is a little bit too liquidy, so we're actually gonna add another 1/4 cup of flour. So let's just dry this off a little bit here. So let's add another 1/4 cup of flour. There we go. All right, now let's keep mixing this up. Here we go. Now this is starting to look good. All right, so you'll see it is getting quite thick. I'll show you in just a second here. I'm just gonna incorporate all the flour well so there's no like white flour chunks left. There we go. So you'll see this is a very thick batter, which is perfect. That's what we want. Now we are essentially ready to put it onto the pie plate. What I did forget is something to essentially grease the pie plate so that the crust doesn't stick. So I'm just gonna run to the pantry here. So what I'm going to use is actually coconut oil to coat the bottom of the pan, and I like to do this with wax paper. So you just take a little bit of wax paper and put it in here. Just take a little bit like this, and then you literally just rub the pan. Just give it a good little layer here. There we go, that's it. Now you throw that in the garbage. And you are ready to put the pie crust into the pie plate. So you will notice here that, like I said, this is pretty sticky. So we're just gonna put it in like this. We'll just scoop it all in here. And then we're gonna start spreading it out a little bit with the spoon, as much as you can. And like I said, you know, this really is not your typical crust where you would like roll it out and it fits perfectly in. This is a little bit different. So what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna start pressing it down with my fingers. And what I like to do for this is if you get your fingers just a little bit wet, it prevents the batter or the crust, I guess, from sticking to them. So let's do this together here. I'm going to just get a little tiny bit on my fingers, and then I can start pressing it down, moving it up the edges. And if it starts sticking a little bit, like you'll see it does start sticking a little bit, I just give them a little rinse. Dab them off just a smidge, and then continue. And so that's it. So it's almost like, you know, this could almost be like a cookie crust in a sense, because you could very much use this pie crust batter to make cookies. But we are using it as a pie crust. You will see it is delicious within the pie. You won't be disappointed. And so we're just gonna keep flattening it out and running it up the sides of the pie plate until it's fairly even everywhere. So you can kind of feel it as you go. Try to get it, you know, as evenly spread as you can, so that there's not bigger chunks or thicker pie crust in some places than others. So this is looking good. I think I'm going to leave it at this. There we go. I'm gonna rinse my hands again. And there we have it. So you've got your pie crust. I'm actually gonna see if I can scrape just a little bit more out of the bowl for this section here. Could be a little bit higher up the plate here to match the rest. There we go. All right, so this looks lovely. We've got a nice pie crust here. I'll say it again, this is not your typical pie crust, and that's okay. This is something a little bit different, but it's equally as delicious. All right, so now I'm going to put this pie crust, I will show you what it looks like. Essentially, it is just nicely coated. I'm going to put this pie crust into the oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit. I did not preheat my oven, once again, I never do. I'm gonna pop it in, I'm gonna put the timer on for about 10 minutes to start with, and then check it, and I will come back once it is cooked. So see you soon. All right, welcome to my stove. Here we have our apples. They are starting to cook down. We have our pie crust in the oven currently. And so I'm going to show you what these look like right now. Essentially, the water is almost boiling, not quite. Like I said, these ones are probably going to take quite a bit of time to cook down because they are Honeycrisp. They're a little bit harder of an apple, and so they take a little bit longer, but that's okay. We just have to be patient. So essentially, you just stir them every once in a while. What I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to add the cinnamon in now because it just, first of all, it makes the house smell lovely. So you could add it in once the apples are completely cooked down. I like adding it in now because it just adds such a nice aroma. So we are going to add half a tablespoon of cinnamon to these apples. There we go. And then we are just going to mix it in. We'll mix it in nicely here. And then we'll put the lid back on. And essentially what you're going to do is you're just going to keep cooking them down until they are like mushy. So I'll put the lid back on and just let it keep going. I'm kind of keeping it at medium heat here, and I'll keep it like that until the end basically. So they'll keep boiling, and right now you'll see like it looks like there's a lot of water. Let me see if I can show you this here. I'm just gonna grab another oven mitt. This pot actually gets quite hot. So you'll see it looks, you know, there's still a lot of water in it, but as they cook down, the water evaporates a little bit, and at the end you'll have mostly just apples left and very little water. So we are just gonna let these keep going. We will put the lid back on, and I will be back shortly once our pie crust is ready. All right, our pie crust is ready. So I ended up leaving it in the oven for 15 minutes. You'll see, I literally just pulled this out, so it's very hot, but you'll see that essentially, like, to touch, it's fairly hard. It's not like there's no give to it anymore, really. The edges are all nicely browned around here, and there's some browning around the bottom as well. So that's kind of when you know that it is done. So now we will just let the pie crust sit and cool until our apples are ready. Our apples are still boiling down. They've been in for just about half an hour now, so I'm guessing it will be about another half an hour. Usually it takes about an hour for them to fully boil down. So I will be back, or I will meet you back at my stove, I guess, once the apples are fully cooked down to show you how to make the filling, and then we'll fill the crust together and then we'll be done. So I will see you again soon. All right, so welcome back once again. Our apples are just about ready. I have just turned the stove off, so let me show you what this looks like. Essentially, you will see the apples are cooked down. They have basically taken, some are a little bit more full shape, some are a little bit more puree, and that's pretty much what you want. Now, one thing I will note, you'll see here that there is almost no water left. So if you are cooking your apples, and I've been stirring these every, 5 to 10 minutes just to check on them. If you notice that the water is getting really low, but your apples are still quite hard or not, not very mushy yet, then you'll definitely want to add a little bit more water, maybe just a 1/4 cup at a time, just to make sure they're not sticking to the bottom. So now that these are ready, we are actually going to prep our apple pie filling. So this is the main part of the filling, but we are going to add a 1/4 cup of maple syrup in here. So we'll do this like this. Just a 1/4 cup, just to sweeten the apples a little bit. If you don't want to add the 1/4 cup, you don't have to. It just adds a nice little maple flavor and a little bit of sweetness. Now, we already added our cinnamon. We did that before. And now we are going to add some cornstarch. Now, cornstarch is what is going to thicken the filling so that it stays nicely together, and once it cools, then it's kind of what does the magic. So we are going to essentially put this into a measuring cup. So this is 1 tablespoon, 2 tablespoons, 3 tablespoons, and let's do 4 tablespoons. Let's see here. So that was 4 very full tablespoons of cornstarch. Let me see what that looks like. We're actually going to add one more. 5, and I just buy this. I buy like the Bob's Red Mill cornstarch. There are lots of different kinds out there that you can buy. Any cornstarch will do. So this looks good. And now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go to the sink, and I'm just going to add enough water so that we can stir it really well. So I added my water. Now we've got, it shows 3/4 cups on here of the, the 4 tables, or the 4 or 5 tables. Now I don't even remember what I put in, so I'm gonna have to watch again to see. But that essentially just lets us stir it up. So now we are going to stir this so that all of the cornstarch is well incorporated. Just everything is mixed properly here. Oops, I just splashed a little bit. That is okay. So let's mix it up. And then what we are going to do is we are going to add it to the pot. So right now the burner is off. The apples are still very hot. And essentially what happens is when the mixture is very hot and the cornstarch goes in, you'll see that the mixture starts to thicken. If your apples have cooled down too much, then you might have to turn the burner back on, which is why we're doing this over here. So I am actually going to move this right here so that I can do this a little bit more easily. So here we go. We're going to pour this in, and I'm just going to start stirring this. So immediately it is not really thickening up quite yet. So I'm just going to turn this front burner on. Oops, if it will. Okay, this burner doesn't want to cooperate right now. So we'll put it back here again. Sometimes the burners don't cooperate. All right, so we are just going to mix this up. Usually you will see that it starts to thicken after about like 1 minute of boiling, so it really doesn't take a lot of time. And you'll notice that it actually darkens in color a little bit as it thickens. So that's kind of when you know. So you'll see now it's starting to thicken a little bit, if you can see that. And so we're just gonna let it keep going a little bit here. This is looking good. Let me see if I can show you this a little better. Not really. I'm gonna have to figure out some better camera angles here for us one day. But anyways, this is looking really good. You'll see now it's quite thick. It kind of just plops off the spoon, which is what you want. And as it cools, it will thicken more, and then it will create that apple pie filling that you want, that doesn't fall apart, that stays nicely. So I'm actually gonna turn off the burner now, and I will show you this. So that is perfect. It's just kind of drooping off the spoon, which is great. And so what I am going to do now, I will move this aside. I will move this back over a little bit like this. We will grab our pie plate and essentially just put the pie filling in. So here we go. Let's do this together. We will just fill the pie like this. That looks good. And then I'll put this back over here. You just kind of spread it out and you've got a beautifully filled pie. Now, if you want to add a little decoration to it, one thing you can do is just add some like crushed almonds or a little bit of oats. And actually what I'm going to do, because I have this in the fridge, so one moment. So I am going to add a few almonds on top here. So these are essentially just, so this is a mixture of almonds, oats, and maple syrup together that I roast to make kind of like a lovely almond oat snack with a little bit of maple syrup. So it's just like a nice sweet little snack that I like to keep in the fridge. So I mean, this is totally optional. Like I said, you could choose different decorations for the top. You could have no garnish on the top if you wanted. Totally up to you. I like adding a little bit of something just to make it look a little prettier. But essentially this is it. This is our apple pie. Now I will let it cool on the counter for, I don't know, probably like 10 or 15 minutes, and then I will put it in the fridge. And then it takes a few hours to set at least, like it needs to cool fully. So I usually let it cool overnight. You've probably noticed it's gotten quite dark here. We started in the daylight, it is now dark. And so I am going to let it cool overnight. And then it can be enjoyed tomorrow. So thank you so much for making this apple pie with me. I hope you enjoy it, and I will see you in the next video. And yes, just again, thank you for baking along with me. I really appreciate it. All right, have a good night, everyone.